and welcome to another Vintage Day. In this episode, we're going to take a look at another old cookbook. This one, actually, is from the area where I grew up. This is from the church that I went to when I was a child out near our farm. But this edition was quite old, and my mother's copy was in such terrible condition that I actually took it in and had it reprinted. And it turned out that he made it on this wonderful bright orange paper. The original was actually kind of a leatherette type paper, but it was in such poor condition. And this gentleman offered to do it for free, and so I didn't make any specifications. But I can tell you one thing. In this bright orange cover, it is so easy to find in my cookbooks. So there is a plus to that. But this is actually a 50th anniversary, a copy of a cookbook that they made, or actually the first edition they made. And it was from all the ladies who were members of the women's group. And this was in Bantry, North Dakota. And at the time, the church was called Evangelical United Brethren Church of Bantry, North Dakota, which later became the United Methodist Church. A very small church, not very big. Every family knew what pew they sat in. Very simple and very comfortable, you might say. But this book is absolutely wonderful. I'm suspecting that it was printed probably in the late 40s, maybe early 50s, but I doubt it. And the print in it and the detail of the fancy work around the recipe pages is quite interesting. But I'm going to read you what they wrote in the first part of this book, because I think it's very much what I'm trying to promote with people today, is that we should carry on our family traditions. So it says, in this choice of recipes contributed by the members and friends of the Women's Society of World Services of the Evangelical United Brethren Church of Bantry, North Dakota. And it goes on to thank people who actually advertised in it. And it says, many of these recipes are handed down from one generation to another, and through our efforts we wish to preserve them that future generations may also derive the pleasure that is ours. And I will have to say that going through this cookbook is really a trip down memory lane for me, because there's so many of my family members who contributed recipes to this cookbook, and also names of people that I remember throughout the past that, lived 30 miles this way or 40 miles this way out on the prairies where we lived. It is really a heartwarming cookbook just for that, but the recipes are also really tried, true, and wonderful. And as this was the copy of my mother's, she actually wrote little comments in this cookbook. If something was too dry, or you should use a little less of this ingredient or more of another, and so I find that quite delightful in here. And she also cut out and pasted other recipes to add to this cookbook, or she hand wrote other recipes from other friends and family members in here too. So the recipe that we're going to take a look at today is my grandmother's. And I find it interesting that a lot of the women didn't use their name. My grandma's name was Anna, and it wasn't written recipe by Anna Peterson, it was Mrs. Otto Peterson. So times have really changed. And there's a recipe in here for my mother also, and it's also written as Mrs. Walter J. Taylor. Of course, this cookbook, like any other cookbook, had many different sections, but it seemed a lot of the contributions for recipes were in the sweets section. So the cookies and cakes and desserts are plentiful with recipes, and they're all very good because they've all been tried and true tested. And many I have eaten out of this book, and they are so good, and to this day I still make them. So if this was a 50th anniversary book in the late 40s, 50s, it's what, 60-some, 70-some years old already? But today I'm going to make for you my grandmother's applesauce cake. And it has cloves and cinnamon in it. It looks kind of a spice cake. It can also be changed into a fruit cake for the holidays. You can buy some of that candied fruit and put in it, or put golden raisins and cherries in it. It's a really versatile recipe and very reliable. One of the first things you're going to want to do is find a good cast iron skillet. This really works best for the cake. But if you don't have one, you can cook it in a regular pan also. But if you are going to use an iron skillet, you do need to put some parchment paper in it, or wax paper. The easiest way to do it is like this. What I've done is used my fingernails to actually make a trace of the paper, and then you just cut it out. Doesn't have to be perfect, it'll be just fine. And then what you do is you will take some Crisco and put it all over the pan, and then you will lay this down in it, stick it to the bottom, and voila. So I'll include the recipe in the description of the video. And it's called the Applesauce Cake by my grandmother, Anna Peterson. So first we're going to mix a cup of sugar and shortening together. Once you have your shortening and sugar combined, you're going to add your spices. So we have a pinch of salt, a half a teaspoon of cloves, rather, that was nutmeg, 1 teaspoon of cloves, and if you don't like cloves, you could reverse it and put more nutmeg in than cloves, and 1 teaspoon of cinnamon. And mix that all together. Once all your spices are blended with your shortening and sugar, you can then add your raisins. Now this is where you can get a little bit creative. During the holidays, my grandmother would buy those candied fruits and literally turn this into a fruitcake. She would add those and walnuts, and it's actually better than fruitcake if you ask me. But this time I actually took raisins and I soaked them in some spiced rum to give them a little bit of a kick, just for something different. It's just such a versatile recipe, you can do so many things with it. And blend those in. Oh, they smell so good. So the next step is to take a little bit of hot water, they don't specify how much, and you're going to add your teaspoon of soda. Get that dissolved in your water, and then stir it into your applesauce. And you can use any kind of applesauce. I happen to have a lot of apples this year, so I made my own applesauce, and I live in an area where there's many types of apples, so I kind of did a mix of apples when I did my applesauce, so I can't even tell you what's in here. Probably a blend of 5 different apples. But look at how that soda reacts in there. Isn't that kind of fun? Looks like a science project. And then you're going to add this to your shortening. Blend that all together. And it gets to look like it's separating or curdling, and that's just the way it looks, and it's going to be fine, trust me. that, we're going to add our 2 cups of flour. And beat it thoroughly. And quick as that, it's ready to go. So you're just going to pour this into the pan we prepared earlier and cook it for about 45 minutes on a moderate oven, which is about 350. And I find that quite interesting that most of the recipes in the book do not specify how hot the oven should be. And I start testing it to see if it's done at about 35 minutes, because depending on your oven, it will really make a difference. And if you're cooking it in a cast iron pan, it tends to get done a little faster than if you're using a glass or aluminum pan. I chose to frost this cake with a brown sugar frosting. I've also done it with a chocolate frosting, or you could even leave it plain. I think it is best served with a good strong cup of black coffee. Thank you for joining me on another vintage day. If you like this video, please hit that thumbs up and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.